Hey guys, alright? Welcome everyone. In a power plant outside the city, employees are celebrating a colleague's birthday when they notice something strange on the security cameras. There's a shadow moving in the well, and a worker goes to check it out but is attacked by a mysterious monster. The man tries to return to the office but is followed by a group of beasts that begin to kill everyone in the building. As an eclipse hides the sun, creatures begin to appear all over the planet, killing millions of people and destroying cities. The news calls it Judgment Day, as soldiers are sent to fight these monsters in a war that lasts throughout the eclipse. Millions of lives and tons of resources are lost in the fight, but eventually, all the creatures are exterminated, and humanity begins to rebuild. They design protective facilities known as gates, in case the creatures decide to return. 15 years pass, and the world returns to a normal routine. David works as a janitor in a company that doesn't pay him well, even when he has to go into the wells to remove dead animals. At the local school, Laura works as a teacher and befriends her colleague Milton, who insists on asking her out. Laura divorced David a long time ago and is still dealing with some issues, but today she finally accepts Milton's invitation. Meanwhile, her son Tyler is with his girlfriend Maddie, who is worried about the upcoming eclipse. Tyler tells her there's nothing to worry about, as there have been many eclipses in the last 15 years and nothing happened. Meanwhile, Officer Garrett is called by the staff at one of the gates, requesting his presence because they have confirmed significant seismic activity, and the containment has been approved. When Garrett arrives at the gate, he feels that this time it's not a drill. He checks all the systems, only for a power panel to explode, causing them to lose an entire network. In the city, David goes to pick up Tyler at Laura's house, and while the boy is playing video games, the parents start to argue. It turns out that Laura was pregnant with Tyler during the last disaster and David wasn't there to help her, and she hasn't forgiven him since. Tyler interrupts them and leaves with his father. Later, in the middle of the night, David gets a call from Uncle Ted, who is sure that the new Judgment Day will be tomorrow and invites David to bring his family to his shelter before the eclipse begins. Tyler is watching the news and becomes restless when he sees millions of dead fish appearing on the beaches. This is one of the signs that were seen 15 years ago. At that moment, the first monster appears at the gate, silently climbing the stairs. At the same time, Laura calls David, saying she saw the news and wants Tyler to come home because Milton has reserved a shelter. David wants Tyler to stay with him, and an argument starts, during which Tyler receives a text that makes him leave the house secretly. When David finally goes to look for him, he finds only a note in his room with Maddie's number. Milton pressures Laura because the shelter is filling up, so they need to get there soon. When Laura explains that Tyler is missing, Milton uses the boy's phone number to track the location with special software and finds him at the skate park. It turns out Tyler is there with Maddie, who is very nervous and scared because her parents left. Tyler promises her that he is not like his father and that he will never leave her alone. Suddenly, a loud scream is heard, and huge flocks of birds appear in the sky, which is another sign of the apocalypse. People in the park run in panic, and soon the roads are filled with families trying to leave the city. David gets stuck in a massive traffic jam, but when he sees the birds flying, he gets out of the car and continues the search on foot. At the gate, workers are checking the systems when they hear some strange noises. A monster suddenly appears and starts attacking one of the men. Garrett flees as the other soldiers open fire, but it seems that regular bullets don't affect the beast. Moments later, David finally finds Tyler and Maddie just as the emergency sirens begin to blare throughout the city. Fortunately, Laura shows up with Milton, and they take all three in their car. With about an hour left until the eclipse, the city is in complete chaos. With people trying to escape, there are jams on all the roads. The family gets stuck for a while and sees cultists walking among the cars, scaring drivers with their painted faces and their conviction that the end is near. When Milton finally sees an opening, he drives as fast as he can and manages to take the family to the shelter. Unfortunately, there's chaos here too, with many people begging for a place inside while the military says that only women and children are allowed. David tells Tyler to go with Laura and Maddie to the shelter, but after entering, Tyler regrets it and runs back to his father, saying he would never leave him behind. The women follow him out, and at this moment the scoreboard announces that the shelter is completely full. The group runs back to the car, discussing options. David wants to go to Ted's hideout in the desert, while Milton suggests hiding in the school because it's closer and has a basement. They soon find themselves stuck in another traffic jam, so they end up getting out of the car when an earthquake hits the area and the eclipse begins. With the world plunging into darkness, monsters begin to emerge to attack. They immediately take the city and start killing mercilessly, just like 15 years ago. David insists they should leave the city and wants to drive, but Milton gets furious because this is his car and he knows how to save everyone. An argument breaks out and punches are exchanged, but the fight is interrupted when a flying monster swoops down and takes Milton. As Laura screams, David pushes her into the car and takes the wheel to finally get his family out of the city. As they drive along the canal, they theorize about the origin of the monsters, wondering if they were sent by God or not. Eventually, the car begins to run out of gas, and David wants to find a substitute. He parks next to a pile of abandoned cars and starts checking them, discovering there are bodies inside them. When he finally finds an empty car, he gets in, only for the hidden driver in the back seat to pull him down, revealing that there is a monster nearby. The beast continues to rummage through the vehicles looking for more victims, and when it passes close to the two men, fortunately, it doesn't see them and moves on. The monster finds one of the bodies and begins to devour it, so very carefully and quietly, David starts to move the car back to Laura and the kids. Now both cars are side by side, so Laura and the kids try to move from one car to another. They are very discreet about it, but the monster still notices them and comes after them. The old man gets out of the car and spreads salt over the beast, but this only stops the monster for a moment, and then it jumps on the man to start devouring him. The family uses this distraction to finally move away from the area, taking an abandoned path into the mountains as hordes of monsters flood the city from all sides. Eventually, they finally reach Ted's hideout, which is a true concrete bunker. The doors are shut, and there are cameras on the roof, but no one comes out when the family starts screaming and banging on the door, begging to be let in. What they don't know is that Ted is sitting at his computer, watching them on the cameras while someone aims a gun at his head. At that moment, a horde of monsters appears in the mountains and begins to run toward the shelter. As the family panics, David grabs a wheel wrench to protect his loved ones, but then the bunker door finally opens, and they rush inside. The family meets Ted and his wife Stella but is also surprised to find Garrett. Apparently, his father was Ted's war buddy, and he got separated from his unit, so he came here to ask for help. David notices that Garrett has a gun, which makes him suspicious. Then the group shares a meal but can't help but notice on the monitors how the monsters are trying to break down the door, making everyone nervous. Using the radio is also useless because they can only hear screams. Maddie asks how the monsters detect them, and Garrett explains that they react to light and heat, but wonders if they can see people's souls. He also shares the story of how he survived the first Judgment Day. Back then he worked in a refinery, and when the monsters invaded the place, he managed to dive into a pool of salt mud. He buried himself and had to listen to the monsters killing all his colleagues and friends. While Garrett is distracted telling his story, Ted signals to David to grab and hide a knife, unaware that outside a centipede-like monster is crawling through a small hole in the screen over the window. Then Garrett announces that he will be the first to keep watch, so Ted invites the others to stay and play cards instead of sleeping, looking significantly at David. However, Garrett notices the gesture and draws his gun, forcing David to place the knife on the ground while explaining that Ted was against allowing him to stay. It was Stella who felt sorry for him. He survived the first time and is determined to survive again at any cost. Suddenly, Tyler lunges at Garrett to try to grab the gun, but Garrett just pushes him away. An argument ensues, but Maddie interrupts it by pointing out that they can no longer hear the monsters. Then the centipede-like monster jumps from the wall and bites Stella. While Ted tears the creature from his wife's neck and pours salt on it, David punches Garrett to grab his gun and try to shoot the creature. The little monster dodges all the bullets, but Maddie manages to kill it with the knife. After that, they tie up Garrett and try to stop the bleeding from Stella, but they will need proper medical care. At that moment, they notice on the monitor that a huge beast is repeatedly slamming against the front door, trying to get in. David says they need to leave, but Ted doesn't want to go out, saying his wife won't survive outside. Stella wants him to go and reminds him of the underground tunnel under the bunker, which leads to the mountains. Garrett says he has a car with a full tank that can take everyone to the gate, and the group doesn't know if they should believe him until Garrett points out that it's beneficial for him to help them. They decide to leave, but before Ted reveals that he has an entire arsenal of weapons, and everyone arms themselves. As the group enters the tunnel, David opens the front door and blows up the first beast that comes through it before joining the others. Once the tunnel is properly sealed, they exit and notice that Stella is struggling to walk because she is starting to transform into a beast too. Later, they are going down a road when Tyler spots a monster just standing there. The beast seems to be dead, so Maddie tries to touch it, only for Tyler to stop her. When she turns around, a long tentacle comes out of a hole in the ground and grabs her legs, trying to drag her away. As Maddie screams uncontrollably, Tyler and David hold onto her, and Laura shoots the tentacle to make it retreat. As soon as Maddie frees herself, the group runs away, and Garrett convinces David to let him go so he can help in case of another attack. What the others don't know is that David is hiding an injury on his arm. Sometime later, they reach the top of the mountain and see the city on fire. When they find Garrett's car, they are devastated to see that it won't start. At that moment, monsters appear at the top of the mountain and start running toward them, so Garrett desperately tries to start it again while Stella takes Ted's gun to end it all for herself before the transformation finishes. Ted asks her to hand over the gun and get in the car, but David, knowing there's no hope, drags Ted back. Stella waits for the monsters to arrive, and they quickly devour her. Garrett finally gets the car started, and the group escapes, leaving the monsters behind. On the way, they pick up a radio signal and hear that almost all shelters couldn't withstand the attack and were destroyed. Eventually, they arrive at the gate, but nobody responds on the radio, and the entrance door is open. The group cautiously advances inside and discovers that there is no power, so Garrett and David decide to fix it while the others go look for a first aid kit because they found out that Ted has a wound on his back. The others take care of Ted while David restores the electricity, and Garrett explains that the gate was prepared for a second invasion and tons of salt water were pumped in, but the hole was too deep. After the power is restored, David and Garrett start to return to the group, but suddenly Garrett feels blood dripping on his hand and looks up to find a body just as something in the darkness roars. The duo runs back to the group to discuss their options, as there are 2 hours left until the end of the eclipse, and Garrett offers to hide in a chemical storage room since its doors are explosion-proof. The moment they exit the medical station, a transformed human attacks Garrett, who fights alongside David to contain it. They defeat the beast, but the noise they made has attracted more monsters. Terrified, Garrett quickly runs through a door and closes it behind him, leaving everyone behind. Then he injects himself with some kind of shot to counter the transformation. David takes his family to another room and notices there are dispersion lines there, which means the tank is on the other side of the wall. This gives him an idea for a plan. He will channel salt water through the tank's pipes to keep the monsters away. Before leaving, Laura kisses him. At that moment, the door breaks, so the family flees. David goes through the ventilation system, noticing a monster devouring its prey in the room. When he reaches the tank, he tries to be as quiet as possible when opening the tap, and the water begins to fill the containers. Then, David climbs back up, but the monster senses him and starts to chase him, grabbing his leg. As David fights back, he spreads salt on the creature, causing it to disintegrate into dust. Meanwhile, the others find themselves surrounded by monsters, and Tyler opens fire on them. Suddenly, David's voice is heard over the loudspeaker asking them to activate the fire alarm. The monsters are closing in, so Ted tells Tyler to protect the family before going after the monsters with an axe, but several beasts jump on him and kill him quickly. Tyler keeps shooting, only to run out of ammunition, so he activates the fire alarm, causing the salt water to start pouring down on the monsters, making them crumble into dust while screaming in pain. At that moment, the eclipse ends, and all the monsters begin to return to their realm through the gate, causing another earthquake. Laura and the kids try to move as well, only to find Garrett, who is losing his sanity due to the transformation. He shoots Tyler and hits him in the shoulder, but before he can shoot again, David appears behind him and hits him in the head with a fire extinguisher. As David reunites with his family, a huge monster appears from below and attacks Garrett, swallowing him whole. The family rushes to the medical unit and makes a saline mixture in a cylinder, which they shoot at the monster as soon as it breaks the door, killing it instantly. After the victory over the monster, the family hugs in relief, and soon after they leave the complex to find the world completely destroyed. Knowing that the plague of monsters has ceased, they are now ready to start rebuilding again.